If the international phonetic alphabet has symbols and sounds you haven't mastered yet, it's time for IPA and IPAs with Molly.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Molly.
It's so good to see you on
Good
Zoom
to see you.
again.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I can't see you in person, but I can see you via Zoom. It's good to
See you
see
via
you
Zoom.
guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are you drinking today?
I am drinking tequila. I know this is supposed to be IPA stuff, but I'm not a huge beer person anyway,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
I do not like IPAs. Actually, I love beer in the Czech Republic.
What does beer in the Czech Republic taste like?
Good. It tastes like good beer as opposed to most of the crap in the US. Although I know it's gotten better, but I think two things keep me from like really getting into beer here. And what are you drinking? You got to tell me what you're drinking.
I am drinking the Devastator Wasatch, which is a Utah brewing company. It's a double bock. It's not an IPA because I actually don't like IPAs either, but calling a show IPA and any dark beer wasn't wasn't a good title. So I went with IPA and IPAs, and I'm gonna learn to like them maybe.
Yeah.
But this one's it says tastes like plum, malt, and rich. So it's a very full-bodied.
Yeah.
So
And I think my deal with not getting really good at drinking beers is well, partially sometimes I'm just not in the mood a lot of the time.
yeah.
And the other thing is that I feel like I like have to invest so much in understanding all these different things. I'm like, just I mean, quite frankly, if I have a beer of choice, it's Shiner. It's a
Oh,
happy medium for me because I think it's a very tasty beer. It's got a little bit of a dark quality to it,
mhm.
and it's also cheap, and I'm cheap. And so, that's a good answer. However, that said, I'm drinking this lovely tequila, which is Maestro Dobel Diamante.
Oh, nice.
Actually, I think this still might be the end of the first bottle. Maybe this is my second, but I've got another one to back it up because there's only a tiny bit in here.
Only a little
But
bit in your tequila cup.
I think this is the one that I believe was a gift from Adam Noble. If it wasn't this, it was the first time that I got this. And
Nice.
it's a really nice tequila, but I was having some hard times. Can I swear on this show?
Yeah, I'll put a swear warning in this one.
Okay, good. Shit was going down. And I was just like, oh man. And Adam just he said something about the tequila fairy has visited. Like, what? And I go out onto the back porch. He had snuck onto the back porch and he put this sign that I should have brought in with me. He put this sign on the porch, buy this bottle of tequila. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
I think we
And
should lean into the tequila fairy. That's something I can get
I
behind.
loved it. And I was trying to pay him back because he loves this candy called Turkish Delight.
Oh, okay.
And so I bought a bunch of Turkish Delight and I don't really like it. Don't tell him.
I won't.
And I put it in his mailbox with a sign that was something like Turkish Delight Fairy, or I don't remember what that was. And he was a little creeped out by it. He couldn't figure out. He was like, so he just kept them and didn't want to eat them because he was like, is somebody getting back at me or what's going on?
And someone trying to poison me.
Yes. And then I finally joked a little bit about it. And he goes, wait a minute. Now that I can swear, son of a bitch, was that you? And I'm like, yeah,
yes,
that was
Adam.
me.
No one's trying to poison you. I was just trying to give you candy.
I think he'd had a particularly tough week when I put that into his box. And so he was like, is there something? What is going on? So cheers.
Cheers.
Ding. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
Mm.
So you're writing a book.
Yeah.
What's it about?
Well,
tell us.
In many ways, I backed off of this being, so it's about IPA, but it's also about, I'm calling it basically Generican and phonetics.
Nice.
Because there's so much baggage about general American, standard American, all these different terms that people use. And I like to use the term Generican.
Mm-hmm.
And So I actually made a shift in this year because I've been working on this IPA book, which you had done a little bit of work out of and stuff.
Mhm.
And I actually made a big shift because I was like, I just think this is overwhelming about the IPA. And I want to start much more with speaking, and then let's connect the IPA to the reality of the speaking. So then what I do in it's actually resembles my other accent help materials in that it's got the standard sort of, let's give you some context, let's talk about placement, let's talk about intonation, now let's sounds, but the sounds just go on and on and on and on and on. Because I
Yeah.
go through each and every vowel, every single vowel plus R, all the diphthongs. I go into all the different consonants and have a bunch of practice words for each one. I'm still working on it. I'm finishing the writing of it. And I think later this week, I'm actually going to start recording, and then I'll be
Mhm.
rewriting some stuff. So it's not quite reaching the physic, or it won't even be physical, it'll be digital, but the book itself will not be that massive. I
Mhm.
think right now my draft is only about something like 18, 19, maybe 20 pages. So it's much smaller because it's kind of an introduction to phonetics and only getting into a
Mhm.
few diacritics and such.
Okay.
But it's really focused on going, okay, here's pronunciation in what I want to call relaxed generican, or you could think of it as film generican.
Mhm.
Here's pronunciation in elevated generican. We could think of it as stage generican. And then I'm going, well, actually, I'm going to go relaxed generican to RP standard British.
Oh.
And then I want to go, now let's talk about these elements that we're going to steal and bring into elevated generican. And then
Mhm.
I'm also going to dabble just a little bit in TMA, trans mid Atlantic. Once
Yeah.
again, that mixture of terms. So
Yeah.
that's what's going on. That's all. And so it's going to be video and audio. It's going to be a lot of audio and some video with it as well. And then the written as well. I'll
Nice.
drink to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no small feat.
Yeah. Well, and we'll see if it takes me the next year to finish it. But hey.
Hey, you're writing a book. You give yourself some grace. It can take however long it takes.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
I started the one that you worked out of like back in like well over 10
18.
years ago, probably like 2008 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's been around in one form or another for a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's important because I think like the first time I learned IPA was in undergrad, and
Mhm.
we learned the like quote unquote good speech. And I remember thinking that that was like a kind of a messed up term. And our teacher, like, to be super fair, she wasn't like, you must speak with good speech. Like, she would talk about like your accent is just fine for your life, but when you go on stage, this is what you should do. But I remember being like, that's messed up.
Yeah. That
Like who
term is awful, isn't it?
like who decided what good speech was? And
People with that kind of speech
yeah.
who can then judge everything, because it just implies. Dudley Knight has a really good book, and one of the things he says in it is what is the name of it? I've got an electronic version, so I can't just look and see it, but it's um, experiencing speech, I think is what it was. And I trained with Dudley in Fitzmaurice Land like way back in 2000 or something. And
Mhm.
so I had like an early copy of his book, and that had an influence on me definitely with IPA and such. Um, and he says something in there about the fact that the moment that you talk about good American speech, it is the implication that there is bad American speech. And especially as somebody who works on accents, that annoys the crap out of me because somebody's accent is not bad. And that's, in fact, I'm fighting against that all the time when I'm trying to record people. It's like, no, I love your accent. I
Yeah.
love accents.
Don't fix it.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
fix
Don't
it.
fix it because there's no fixing it. You can choose to change it, but don't
Yeah.
fix it because there's nothing broken. Unless I can't understand you,
Yeah.
unless you can't communicate with people, then there's something that's broken.
Yeah, but that's not, yeah. I'm glad you stressed that because that's I taught an undergrad class at UH, and one of the things that I told them over and over and over, because it was speech and articulation for non-majors, was like, if you have a native accent, and you are fine with it, it is fine. I will help make sure that we can understand you, but you don't have to change it.
Yeah.
Because that's fucked up.
Is there anything along that line of thinking that shifted for you over the course of that semester of teaching it?
I think I just hadn't really really dived into that idea because I grew up, I mean, I'm Midwestern, and I think my parents are pretty well, like, clearly spoken. And I remember like being like, okay, sound like the newscaster.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I had any huge regionalisms. Occasionally my ashes, they flatten, especially if I'm home, I get a flat ash. But but I don't think I had anything huge that I was shifting when I got to college and we were talking about like what's a regionalism and where do you need to be aware of it. I didn't have that much. And so it just was never on my radar because it didn't relate to me.
Yeah.
And I had never thought about being a speech and dialect teacher or coach until grad school. And then when I was teaching that class, I was like, you know, University of Houston is so diverse. And so I had students, you know, I had a student from Colombia, I had a student from Korea, I had a, you know, and all of these students who were taking speech and articulation for non-majors for all sorts of reasons. But a few of them were saying, you know, English is my second language. And I want to make sure that I can speak clearly when I go into a professional field. And that was when I really started to draw the distinction between like, well, if you want to speak clearly, you're already speaking clearly. Like I can understand everything you're saying. I think you're very well spoken. And imagine how well spoken you would be in your topic of study, like rather than talking about IPA with me. And so, you know, which they were like, some of them really did not like IPA. You can't force everybody to love what you love. But I'm glad
And,
that
and it's hard because it's overwhelming and scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, and especially I think some of my students that English was their second language, we would talk about when they were transcribing words, they're like, well, I would say it like this. And so I would look at their transcription and be like, say it for me. And they'd say it and I'd be like, okay, well, you transcribed what you say. So that's right. You did it.
That's awesome. I love that.
So it was a huge just kind of paradigm shift because I hadn't dealt with that yet.
Yeah. You know, something that occurred to me a few years ago was one of the wordings that I use with people sometimes is I go, well, what is the ear you're trying to speak to?
Ooh.
And from what you're talking to me about is you're trying to speak to an American ear. So this is a challenging sound for an American ear but it wouldn't be challenging for a British ear.
Yeah.
You know, like the fact that law gets rounded. Somebody might say lot, and an American will go loat. You know, there's that challenge of, so that's why they may need to work on saying lot in order for the ear to comprehend it very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And for them to be able to move on and get their idea across without the language getting in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm glad that, and I think from what I've seen, the kind of the trend across teaching speech is moving towards, I guess, away from the idea of good speech.
Yeah.
Thanks to the work of people like Dudley Knight, which I'm so glad. Because I was just curious when I was getting ready for this and I pulled Speak with Distinction because that's how I learned phonetics the first time, and I was looking at all of it and I looked it up and this was published for the first time in 1942.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, like Edith Skinner has great work, but we can't treat it like it's like the only work.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can touch the amount of drill material that she's created. I mean, nobody's got anything close to that. It's amazing. I disagree with the number of her choices.
Yeah.
And both in like certain pronunciations, I'm like, what? No, okay. You know, you're only teaching fancy pants talk. You're not teaching like real human talk. So that's problematic. Plus some other things that I'm like, what, that was confusing to me early on before I started getting a better grasp of different accents and which I have to say, just a bunch of things got clear for me when I really started to like rely a little bit more on the J.C. Wells lexical sets. And I've shifted more and more towards using that.
Wells.
Going, let's not talk about that sound, like the 3, 4, 5, the Hell's Corner, the father, lot, cloth, thought, but instead, oh, that's a 3, 4. Oh, that's a 5, 4, or whatever that's, the way that I have spoken about it. Now I'm much more like, great, that's a lot word. I know that's the same sound as father and lot, but can you tell me which of these words are father words and which ones are lot words?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be so defining when it comes to all these different accents.
Yeah, when you move out of the generic and you move into other accents of the world, you have to have that clarification.
Yeah.
I will say, when I taught the Hell's Corner in my class, they kept being like, well, can we go back to that? Because I don't get it. And I was like, because we are only working on these are the sounds generally within American. No, we can't. We don't have time. Sorry. So like at the end of the semester, I said, like, what do you wish you learned that you didn't learn? And they're like, I really wanted to know about Hell's Corner. And I'm like, you are my people, but we didn't have time.
And I love that you continue to call it Hell's Corner.
It is. It's hellish, especially in General American.
Yeah.
It's awful.
This year in one of this online accents class that I was teaching, there was a student who ended up describing the R sound in general, the concept of the R sound, as Hell's consonant. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so great. I'm stealing that. Thank you. It is now mine. Yeah.
Nice.
And it is. It's like all these different R's that exist, and exactly how do you tweak it for here? And even in this one accent, the R is different in this position than it is in this position, and it's a pain in the butt.
I've been working through Slavic, and the R's in that, like,
then.
Oy.
So I do have to point this out. I am drinking not out of a standard lovely glass for tequila, but this is actually a mustard jar. So an empty mustard jar.
It's a very pretty empty mustard jar.
Isn't it? I think we have 2 now. We maybe even have a third. I think we got our first one in the Czech Republic. And when we finished that mustard, we had to bring it back with us. My wife was like, we must keep this.
So cute.
I love the mustard jar glass.
Nice. That's a fun detail.
I'm a mustard jar kind of guy.
Can I quote you on that?
Yes, you may.
Okay, cool.
That's my new tattoo I'm getting, actually. Mustard jar guy.
You can never fail with the fresh pale ale and Molly.
That
would be really creepy. You probably won't.
It would be really creepy. We could have matching tattoos.
Wes, that would be like, I should not have spoken my opinion.
I'm gonna backpedal.
Yep, exactly.